all you mangy dogs. Swab the decks and hoist the sails. The guns on board be needing some proper manning. Pieces of 8 and a fine wench on your arm. If your work be not too shoddy. Careful not to flounder too badly, though, or you may have to dance the hempen jig as we see you to Davy Jones. Jeffy, my boy, on with the show. Avast, me hearties. To our listeners from across all regions of the planet, welcome once again aboard the Robin Hood, flagship to the world's one and only cooperatively inspired charity podcast network, WPRPN. Live streaming today from somewhere off the green glowing Wi-Fi shores of South Korea's ubiquitous 5G peninsula, you've tuned in to episode 75 of Pirate Radio Podcasts. I'm your host, as always, the ship's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder. Canadian anti-geoengineering activist Suzanne Maher returns to the Robin Hood this week as we work to cast a little more light on a range of environmental and health-related issues, not the least of which will be the recent wave of intense weather-related disasters impacting various parts of the southern U.S., including Texas and Florida. As one might expect, Tesla technology, chemtrail-based geoengineering, psychotronics, and weather warfare are a number of related topics we've queued up for this week's 90-minute show. Vocal and passionate, since 2012, engaged citizen Maher has fully committed to better educating people regarding these covert, weaponized programs and technologies. Believing it's all our civic, social, and ethical responsibilities to awaken the world, over the past 5 years, she's relentlessly engaged in outreach, communicating her message via online platforms, interviews, awareness booths, hosting events, public speaking engagements, community gatherings, and billboard campaigns. Over time, Suzanne hopes to better educate and inspire others with her outreach so they too can do the same in effecting positive change, working to do whatever it takes in exposing and eradicating chemtrails and planetary geoengineering. Three-quarters of a century old. Can you believe it, folks? We actually managed to make it this far. Of course, the 100th episode will be a major milestone as well. God only knows what we can expect when that comes about sometime in the new year. A lot of ragtag pirates partying, I'd imagine, out here on the decks of the Robin Hood and other miscellaneous watering holes throughout Skullport Harbor. So Suzanne Maher once again has dropped in this week. I believe just at the last moment we managed to even pick up her trusty sidekick and longtime webmaster, among a number of other things, I guess. Seems to be a fellow who wears many hats. Tech Lords. So do we have you with us, Suzanne?
You do. Hi, Jaffe. How are you?
That's great. Hey, if my math is correct, it was just a little more than 50 episodes ago, show number 26, back in July of 2016, that we last actually had a chance to get together and have a bit of a conversation. You've been up to a lot since then, I'd imagine.
Been up to a lot, yeah, particularly this year. So thank you for having me back on. It's a pleasure.
Well, we got Satori D is the one that really I've got to tip my little pirate hat to. So he was the person who first drew you to our attention, and that even may have been courtesy of Tech Lords, I'd imagine. So, speaking of whom, do we have you there, Tech Lords, aka, I guess, JF? I'm not sure if you want your full name revealed on air. Is that what?
Tech Lords is fine.
Yeah.
Tech Lords is fine.
Yeah.
Everybody else on my private demon software network calls me Tech. Yeah, I prefer Tech Lords.
Okay, well, you're coming in via your hand phone, I guess. There, it's what they're called here in Korea. They don't refer to them as cell phones, well, spy. I prefer spy phone. It's kind of my way of looking at things. But if when you're not talking, just if there's any way of muting yourself, that'd be great. But thank you for joining us. It's I'm sure you'll be a welcome addition to things here and helpful in many ways as far as commentary and details and the like. So, but Suzanne, just for people that don't know, because not everyone, of course, had a chance to listen to our last show. It is there in the archives, of course, for anyone who cares to go back and see what it was we managed to put together. But just how was it that you first got hip to the whole chemtrail geoengineering issue?
Well, I was hip to other things that were going on, which didn't sit right with me, Jaffe. So it was, the fluoride, the banking, the Federal Reserve, things of that nature. So, what happened was I was on a website, and it really demonstrates the power of a child and their words, because this was about, I'd say 5 years ago. I was on a website called Blue Sky Jewelry, and a very young girl named Hannah was selling handmade jewelry and accessories, and so she was donating a portion of the proceeds to something called geoengineering and chemtrails. And Hannah explained on her website that she didn't want to go outside anymore because the skies weren't blue, they were being sprayed. And so I bought a few of her items. I donated a few dollars to her cause, but her statements disturbed me and piqued my interest at the same time. Why were the skies not blue anymore? So me being a curious George, I proceeded to investigate, and it sincerely changed my life. And so as of that point, I've been researching the subject from pretty much the day Hannah told me we were being sprayed. And so I create awareness in many venues and many forms. So I do pretty much everything I can think of. I mean, I just kind of throw it against the wall and see if it sticks. So I do booths, many booths I've done all over in Ontario. I do farmers markets, home and cottage shows, outdoor events, interviews. I have a Facebook group, which is almost at 5,000 people right now. So that's pretty great. The website that Tech Lords and I work on almost has 500,000 hits as of today. So that's terrific. I've done a documentary, short documentary. I do print campaigns, and I've done over 20 billboards to spread the message of this geoengineering. So I've done a lot of different things, and in the past 6 years, I think there's been some really good momentum. But that's really the story and the backstory of how I woke up to this.
Bye Blue Skies. .com, I believe, is the website, of course, so people can drop by there while we engage in this conversation here over the next 90 minutes or so, and check out all the great resources that they have on hand. There's a lot of health-related issues, of course, as well as all the latest reports regarding chemtrails, geoengineering, and the like. Things such as, we'll get into this maybe just in a few minutes, but Rhode Island, I guess, recently passed some legislation which really, you got to hand it to them, reflects well on the people of that state, of course. So I'm not sure how that all came about, whether it was just political pressure which could no longer be ignored, or maybe the politicians themselves woke up to the fact that, hey, this affects us too. So, but now let's just shift back to Tech Lords for a minute there, just to let kind of him in on the picture. What is it exactly that Tech Lords? We know you're the webmaster. You've been helping Suzanne out for a number of years here, and she's of course been involved in this whole area of activity since 2012 and this kind of eureka moment, I guess, that occurred in talking to Hannah. Besides the webmastering end of things, how else was it? Well, how did you first meet? I'm not sure if I'm clear on that exactly, and what else is it that you contribute and offer to the overall the operation of things, Tech Lords?
Well, I was on Facebook for a very short period of time, about 6 months, I guess. But I ultimately left because I couldn't handle it anymore. But I think I was introduced via a common friend. I had joined her group on Facebook, and prior to that, I was a webmaster for Clifford Carnicom way back when, and he's one of the pioneers into that field. So I was already aware of the problem, and Suzanne at one point hired someone to build a website, but she got ripped off. And I said, "Well, I'll take care of it." So I sat in front of my computers for 10 hours straight, and I built the website. And that was the start of it. So, yeah, basically that's what happened.
That's your main, I guess, role in things here as far as the just general day-to-day operations of the enterprise is concerned by Blue Skies and by
Blue Sky. I take care of the technical aspect, entering the donations for the billboards, adding pages, formatting some of her posts. Sometimes, there's problems, so I intervene. So that's, I just make sure that Bye Bye Blue Sky is perfect. So
there's a lot of work that really does go into things, obviously, and it's a great site. And you've got a lot of support there, Suzanne. The donations seem to be, not necessarily huge donations, but you do have a lot of supporters, $20, $50, $100, that sort of thing. It's just, with on the sidebar, the menu there with the scrolling, the list of names that people can see there. So that's really great to see the support and awakening, which is one of the things I wanted to ask you about, actually. Do you feel, is there more of a kind of a consciousness and awareness that is occurring and that is visible, as say, compared to just a few years ago?
Good question, Jaffe, because I do so much outreach. So I see the timeline and the trajectory of, 4 or 5 years ago till now. And people aren't running away from the topic. Certainly you're out there and it can make some people uncomfortable and their eyes go downward and they don't want to look at you and they may walk away. But for the most part, people want to talk about this. People are almost dying to talk about this because the people that are awake often don't have too many people to talk to. So they feel very isolated. So when they see a booth right out in a public venue and forum saying, you know what, look up, your weather's being, modified. They're really, it's almost a relief. I've had people say they've cried tears of joy when they've seen one of my billboards because it validates the notion that what they're feeling, thinking, and seeing is true. So, yeah, I think I've noticed a real positive upswing, and it takes work. Look at the GMO movement. It's taken a long time for people to get on board with that, but it's huge now. It's massive, and we're getting there. It takes time. It takes time to build this army. So,
one of the main things that the skeptics, I'm sure you've heard this more than a few times, but they'll say, oh, this is impossible. There's no way. Not only are these simply just contrails, but that there's no way that anyone would do this because it would affect them as well and their families and all that they have at stake. So how do you respond to that when you hear those sort of the skeptics, or let's not forget there's a lot of professional debunkers out there too that they will it doesn't matter what you tell them, they'll simply refuse to acknowledge, and a lot of cognitive dissonance. But yeah, how do you respond to that then, that kind of criticism or assertion?
Well, I think it's two parts. On the one hand, I tell them that these are not people like us. They're elites. They were born and bred into this ideology of depopulation, and it's all for the greater good and for the greater number. They don't care about their families. They don't care about life. So it's not really a big concern to them. And as well, they are privy to things that common folk are not privy to. They have money beyond, anybody's desire, so they can have the most expensive air filtration systems. They can use just homeopathic or naturopathic remedies. They can eat the best foods, and also they don't design these types of programs without having antidotes to counteract what they're doing. So I certainly believe that there are things they're doing to mitigate the fallout. One activist, Max Bliss, he's a quite well-known activist in south of France, was talking to a scientist, and the scientist was telling him that they were working on methodology to mop aluminum up from people's brains. So common folk are not going to have that type of patent. They're not going to get that type of technology. It's just going to be the elites that are privy to this, and this is what I believe. So this is what I tell them, and it's always, I don't even think it's important at the end of the day how they're staving it off. It's what we need to do today to protect ourselves, because we're the ones under assault by them. So
weather warfare, the weaponization of space really is what it comes down to, as far as I personally see things, just based on the research that I've done into the matter. So yeah, so eyes to the sky, folks. Pokemon, geez, I don't even know if we should go there right now, but this whole business of looking up, of course, too, and how so few people do. Wasn't that, I guess it's quite a distraction for many. Still, a lot of the young people, of course, that have got their eyes on their spy phones, not really bothering to look up. But what do you think of that? The whole, did you hear much about that or look into it? The impact that this Pokemon Go game had on society, as far as they're just being so, not really taking the time, I guess, to it's like a form of, I'm not sure how you would describe it exactly, but a kind of mind control, really. What do you think of the impact and phenomena of Pokemon Go, and what that had to do basically as far as distracting people from maybe stopping to look up and see what's going on in the skies?
I think a lot of it is that you're correct, like the psychosocial control and the social detachment. So we've been conditioned not to look up, and these types of games, provide that venue. And I think it's very addictive. And perhaps I don't know what's actually being transmitted through these games to people's brains. So it's not healthy. All we need to do is look up, and people have been conditioned now not to believe their own eyes, which is really dangerous. We just looking up and believing your own intuition and your senses, that's all we need. So yeah, absolutely a distraction and a social detachment. It's not good. It's very negative.
We have about 8 people joining us at the moment, so that's great to see this sort of interest from various quarters. Thank you to everyone who's taken the time to join us here aboard the Robin Hood this week, episode 75, with Suzanne Maher from ByeByeBlueSkies.com, along with her trusty sidekick and longtime webmaster Tech Lords. So just scrolling through the the live streaming YouTube chat area, we see a fair deal of activity. Joe Eminon out of New York says that we got a perfect signal. Levels are good. So that's positive news. It's important to hear. Sometimes find ourselves having to grapple with all kinds of technical issues. So, but Joe Eminon also asking about tech lords and wondering why he hasn't been seeing him around mines as of late. So, maybe address that in the after show, I suppose. We've also got, of course, Faceless Troll, Christina Taft, and a few others, of course. A lot of people, a few colorful comments regarding the whole Pokemon business. What, Suzanne, do you think about this whole recent phenomena we've seen the last month or so? I'm sure you've been following a lot more closely than I have. These massive weather-based disasters that have struck, I guess, the states of Florida, and of course Houston, Texas was hit quite hard recently. I'm not sure if anything's happened on the East Coast of things. It was interesting though, watching the one item that did jump out at me, one of the news stories that kind of came across my screen here and onto my radar, was how, as with this magical plane that and its flight trajectory on September 11th, the one supposed plane that hit the Pentagon did a loop-de-loop from what these people were saying and the images they provided. So a total 360-degree kind of turnaround. Then it decided to head back to the East Coast. I'm not sure if it's impacted there yet or not, but what are your thoughts? Some people say, well, geez, climate change, CO2, carbon emissions, global warming. There's the recent, of course, I guess, a big celebrity type outreach where they were trying to lobby and canvass for to generate funds and support for an effort to help people out who have been displaced. I guess the numbers are just incredible. Like I said, I really have not been following things too closely, being based as I am out of South Korea, and just understanding that the magnitude is immense. I'm sure you've been following things. What are your thoughts on these matters? Hopefully we did not use...
well, hey, I'll answer that question.
I think we might have lost her. Go ahead, Tech Lords.
Okay. Well, I remember I interviewed a few years back someone that really said a really important thing that I'll never forget. There's no natural weather anymore. There's no such thing, So I believe that we do have an increase in weather phenomena on this planet, but some of it is engineered. And the natural disasters that are occurring sometimes can be amplified with scalar technology or, the HARP system and stuff like that. So, and, I believe that, like, Katrina was stirred and probably 50% engineered and amplified. Same with Texas. Florida, I'm not sure. But I know Texas. I've seen a report, and it's pretty damn scary. They were seeding while the storm was coming, so they increased the power of that storm that hit Texas, and I had a conversation with a friend in the U.S. earlier tonight, and apparently they're not saying everything that happened in Texas. There was a sheriff from Ohio who was, a volunteer to help out, But when he saw these fields, and quote, fields of dead body, and it's not being reported. And he figured he saw about 5,000 dead bodies there. So it was so overwhelming for that sheriff, he resigned. So we're not being told the whole story here.
Jeez, what sort of...
Some of these...
That's incredible. So hang on just a second, Techlers. You're saying that it was actually amplified? What the hurricane, Hurricane Harvey, there was cloud seeding occurring in that region at that time, which helped to amplify the impact and magnitude of what hit Houston?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying.
My God. I was not aware of that. That's an interesting allegation. But
you have to understand why. Texas is one of the states in the U.S. that is so darn close to seceding from the Union. They tried before, and they were served with warnings that they would cut off or they would prevent any air traffic in and out of Texas. So they had to postpone their project, but it's still on the table. And they're not the only state. California wants to secede as well. So these are things we don't see in the mainstream media, or hardly.
How did Dallas and cities like Dallas and Austin fare? I'm not clear on that. Were they untouched?
Well, I know that it was pretty bad in Texas, especially near the coast, of course. Houston, that was pretty bad there. Some of the regions are not affected at all. We're not affected at all. But further south, the southern region was really, really hit really hard. And I also learned that half of the donations that were sent for the victims and to help out in Texas, half of those donations were rerouted to Florida. So that's another thing they won't talk about. And I find that, kind of weird.
That's typical, though, isn't it? Par for the course. You often find that sort of duplicity and underhanded, sort of underreported or just completely ignored and not reported whatsoever. These stories and issues and the details to what's going on. Completely.
Thankfully, though,
view.
The donations made by cryptocurrency could not be rerouted to Florida,
right?
Because it's all written on a ledger, on a public ledger. So those stayed for Texas, but the other donations, via the Red Cross and stuff like that.
Oh God!
Half of that went to Florida.
Oh God, the Red Cross. Talk about. No, I don't have a myself. I'm not sure how the others in the listening audience or the two of you are guests today feel about that organization. I just have not heard too many good things, frankly. But that aside, I think we do have Suzanne back. We've also got Corona Woman stating here in the live streaming YouTube chat area that Suzanne Maher, you're wonderful. Thank you for bringing this information to the people. Thank you for those comments, Corona Woman. Is she somebody that you happen to know, Suzanne?
Yeah, she's a wonderful lady that I met on Facebook. So thank you, Corona Woman. Thank you for the support. She's very supportive of Bye Bye Blue Sky. And I'm just very grateful for people like Corona Woman because she's helping Bye Bye Blue Sky get the message out there. So she's the best. Thank you.
And, of course, it is people like that who you need to better spread the message and provide more energy to your campaign and overall enterprise. So what are your thoughts, though, exactly on just, in response to what Tech Lords presented, as well as just generally your own, personal views of what has recently transpired throughout the southern U.S.?
I think it's been horrific, and I think there's going to be more to come. I think this was just the beginning, unfortunately, but there's a Canadian author here, Jaffe, named Naomi Klein, and she wrote a book called Shock Doctrine, and she called this type of thing disaster capitalism. So there are many, many that will make billions from this disaster. And just for example, this would be the property developers, the drought and flood-resistant crop producers, pharmaceutical industries, private healthcare companies, and those enacting the depopulation programs. I mean, this decimates a population. This leaves them vulnerable, traumatized. I mean, they're going to have post-traumatic stress disorder. They're going to be economically destitute and ill. And this is going to come to many, many places, and it's going to ruin people. So this is what I'm seeing here. To me, this was weather warfare at its finest and most destructive. I think Hurricane Harvey really hit Houston, Texas, really badly. I know this was called the 800-year flood event here, and I listened to a fellow, or it could be a woman, I'm not sure, but it's Weather Wars 101, who does a lot of videos on the trajectories of these storms through mappings. And what this person was showing was this storm was stalled and stationary in one place. And instead of blowing through in a few days, as hurricanes do, two high-pressure zones were created to capture the hurricane, and it trapped Harvey between bollards for one whole week. I mean, generally hurricanes disperse and break up, and they just don't stay somewhere for a week. So that was pretty anomalous. And Tech Lords was correct. There was a weather advisory modification committee held 2 days prior to Hurricane Harvey landing, and there was documents from this meeting that I shared on Facebook, as well as others did, and it showed that 6 flares were used in two clouds in Pico Reeves County, which was approximately 557 miles away from Houston. So the clouds in Texas continue to be seeded, even with an oncoming hurricane. So why was this going on? And people in Texas should be hopping mad, and they should be asking this committee, what were they doing? I mean, this is all open, fair on YouTube to get this information. So, this committee needs to be asked this question, and we know that this weather modification affects microclimates. So this is just totally reckless and irresponsible that they did this.
Just following orders, or just following orders, ma'am. Just following orders.
Exactly. And what I also feel is that Hurricane Harvey, and perhaps Irma will be the pretext to create martial law, which is to strip away more of our rights and freedoms and impose this new world order, which we know the cabal wants. So, I mean, FEMA has indicated that they're going to be in Texas for years. I mean, the fabric of that nation has been ruptured. And, Tech Lords is correct. They have a long history of being a fiercely independent nation. They never were under the yoke of the United Nations. Yes, they have spoken of seceding from the federal government as California. But this is a maverick state. They are not one that goes along to get along. They're anti-Agenda 21. They're anti-LGBT. They're fiercely conservative. They're gun-loving. And, everything they're doing is a big poke in the eye to the agenda of the powers that be. And this is what happens. They'll send along a hurricane when you don't toe the line and, stay in order of the agenda. What's really, really interesting too, Jaffe, is Barack Obama signed an executive order in 2015, which established a federal flood risk management standard. And this standard was designed to protect against more frequent floods due to so-called climate change and sea level rises. So 10 days just over 2 weeks before Hurricane Harvey, came to roost, he revoked that order. So this left more people vulnerable to this type of situation. And who knows what's going on in these FEMA camps? We have very little information. I do see some really negative posts online about Red Cross and how they're handling Hurricane Irma. So I feel that these are just more weather wars to imprison the population. And when you look at the wildlands map, I don't know if you've seen the wildlands map, Jaffe, of Agenda 21 2030, but you'll see, most of the U.S. is core reserves and corridors and buffer zones. And that makes up the bulk of the map. And there's these tiny, tiny areas deemed for human settlements. And, basically the USA has virtually no human settlements. So it's pretty patently obvious that they're looking to depopulate. And this map is pure evidence of that. So weather manipulation has been around a long time. And even if I encourage people to do research on this. It only takes a couple hours, but you can look at Project Cyrus, which was instituted around 1947, and it went dismally awry. And there was lawsuits and litigation, and they tried again with Project Storm Fury in the 60s. So this is all, people can look up this online. And there's patents online too. They've got patents to create hurricanes as well as mitigate them. So if this was something that was natural, why wouldn't they use these patents to control hurricane and tornado devices? Because they certainly are able to. It's all a farce.
So it would seem. Naomi Klein, just backing things up there a little bit. I had no idea she was Canadian, so how about that? That's interesting. It's a fun fact for people to keep in mind. Disaster capitalism. Well, sounds like a great title. I've heard it, kind of the name bandied about from time to time, so definitely have to look into that a little more closely. And of course, capitalizing on crisis. I mean, wow, that's kind of their MO, isn't it? To the tune of hundreds of billions, as you stated. So that's the Hegelian dialectic, of course, as well too, in order to further promote and advance their elite 1%. Ruling class political agenda, and to hell with the consequences, damn the torpedoes, and it's pure and utter psychopathy, really. If these things turn out to be the case, then as was pointed out by other people we've had on the show, including the one guest we had, Stefan Verstappen, I think he'd be a very interesting person to talk to. I'm not sure if you've been in touch with him or not, but it might be worth your while. Maybe I could, in fact, hook the two of you up via the one feature that Facebook actually has, which seems to be of any real value, and that's the Suggest a Friend feature. So we'll do that and see where things lead. But let's just, as you said, you really hit on an important point there as far as the history goes and these patents are concerned. Let's just back things up a little bit. I know, and I was just watching in the lead up to things here, a speech given by John F. Kennedy, of all people, talking about one day, controlling the weather. So I guess he seemed to think it was a good thing. You can just imagine what stock market speculators would make of that. I think there'd be a lot of money riding on things as far as the outcome of these disasters, and you've laid that out in a few different ways there, of course, too. So, but they were, the cloud seeding back, I guess, during Vietnam, that era, that it was quite prevalent, it seems, in the U.S. military, highly active on that front. But the thing that really stands out in my mind is the 1977, I refer to it as a worldwide weather warfare treaty. It has some other, I think it's called environmental convention regulation of some sort. I'm not sure the exact phrasing, but isn't that something? World powers come together in 1977, the UN in Geneva, they agree to cease and desist as far as using weather manipulation technology as a means of as weaponization and engaging in war, and yet so many people just don't get it. They don't even stop to think, well, how far have things come since then, as far as the evolution and the ability for these people to actually cause these disasters to come about. Well, why don't, if you would, just kind of back things up to where you think, just to kind of present things and really lay things out there as far as the whole history of weather manipulation and engineering is concerned.
I just want to interject. There is derivatives being traded as far as weather is concerned.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Just like as with 9/11, the kind of very peculiar kind of hanky-panky, I guess short selling is what they call it. So yeah, a lot of speculation. Do you want to talk about that a little more than Tech Lords, as far as the selling of derivatives, I guess is what you called it?
No, I just wanted to mention it.
Right.
It's being created, so
well, and what areas?
You say that we just need to follow the money.
Sure.
And, they play a big game, and they're part of a big club, or a small club, and
you're not in it. You and I are not in the big club.
Not invited.
Well, secret handshakes and having to sell your soul to whoever and whatever. So, but Suzanne, I mean, we can get into that a little more, of course, too. Mainly for me, it's agriculture. Although you can imagine there would be real estate prices or what have you. Just use your imagination. I think there's a few other areas of interest that you laid out there, but like I said, we can get into that a little more over the course of things here. We have about another 45 minutes or so left to, further just kind of work on covering ground here as best we can and presenting what are, the most vital, critical issues and points to get out there to the listening audience so that they themselves can hopefully become a little better informed and maybe even work to inspire them to get a little more engaged and proactive. So, people often, they talk about activists and as if it's a bad thing, it's a pejorative. Oh, he's one of these damn activists. Myself, I like to look at it in the sense of being an engaged citizen. That's my way of seeing things. And so rather than just kind of parroting these terms and slogans they try, the powers that be through media and I'm not sure, academic think tanks and whatnot, the way that we're supposed to just once again parrot these phrases and terms and slogans and whatnot that they feed us. That I like to be able to take a more autonomous kind of reflective approach and rework things. So yeah, engaged citizen is kind of the way I prefer to the take I've got on things as far as that goes. But yeah, the history, Suzanne, I think this is really critical. Can we just back things up then to where did things first kind of the ball get rolling? Nikola Tesla, perhaps?
Yeah, I think for those who don't know about Nikola Tesla, because he died in poverty and ignominy, and he was probably the most brilliant person of our time. He was truly a visionary genius, and he invented so many things. I mean, Edison had nothing on him. Edison invented the single current. He invented alternating currents. He invented high-frequency radio, the X-ray, wireless, and free energy, which is what HAARP is, High Active Auroral Research Program. So he experimented with high and low frequencies and electromagnetic waves. So this is basically where a lot of the HAARP technology initiated or originated. George Westinghouse bought the alternating current patents from Tesla, and I know that he also erected a tower in New York It was to be used as a world wireless tower, but it was never finished because the industrialist J.P. Morgan Chase invested in it and pulled out when he realized there'd be no profit. So they didn't want free energy. I mean, this cabal, these oppressors did not want free energy. So they buried him. I think now you can get some of his information under Freedom of Information Act, but it's pretty sad what happened to him. And I think that he would be very sad to see his technology being used in this way. And there's a term he used. It was a quote. I'm not sad anybody stole my work. I'm just sad they didn't have any ideas of their own. So his ideas were totally ripped off and used against him. So, I guess we can fast forward to the SDI, which was the Strategic Defense Initiative in the 80s, and that was born under the Bush-Reagan defense. And this was also called Star Wars. So this is kind of where this whole chemtrail HARPs pump and dump thing began, and it was created under the pretext of zapping missiles from space, so to create some sort of space shield. They realized they didn't have the power at the time to ionize the atmosphere. So ionizing an atmosphere means to make it like battery ready or antenna like. And they didn't have these phased array antenna systems and Gwen towers like they have today to fulfill this initiative. So a few years later, after that, they put that to bed. They said they disbanded. Along came Bernard Eastland. So he had these patents based on TELSA technology, and his patent was the method and apparatus for altering a region in the Earth's atmosphere, ionosphere, heating and accelerating charged particles. And so that was the phased array HARP technology that was used to make this whole system happen. And that's really how it was born. I mean, the HARP prototype became fully operational around 2001, and now we look at, what's being constructed today. And I highly recommend people to read Ilana Freeland's books. She's a friend of mine, and I just have great respect for her. She wrote the book Chemtrails, HARP, and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth. So she breaks it all down. She discusses 7 agendas of what's going on, why they're doing it, and it's so much more than people. This is what people really need to understand, Jaffe. This is so much more than weather modification. To me, it's almost as simply a sidebar to the geophysical restriction, to the surveillance, to the biological operations. She's actually coming out with a new book called Under an Ionized Sky, From Chemtrails to Space Fence Lockdown. And this is where it gets really deep, really interesting, because Ilana constructs brilliant pictures of what's really going on and how through this electromagnetic grid through these NEXRADs and radar installations and Gwen towers and these conductive frequencies, they are creating an electromagnetic grid not only on planet but off Earth in orbit, creating this space fence, this electromagnetic gulag that we live in. So this is what we're looking at.
Oh, I hear you. And you laid things out there just magnificently. It's a tough word to write. Doesn't exactly, sometimes certain words don't exactly come out the way that, it's hard to pronounce somewhere. Magnificently. Let's try that one. There we go. So, but yeah, I mean, wow. Incredible. The Gwen Towers was one of the points I wanted to raise and to hit on, to ask you about. Alina Vreeland sounds like somebody that we should actually maybe, I'm not sure if if there's any chance that you could maybe help out in having her join us at some point in the new year on the show. That would be just fabulous. We try not to go for the larger, and this is nothing personal, of course, because you are, I think, quite, high, you have well known in some circles at least, although, people like Jim Mars, Alex Jones, David Icke, Graham Hancock, extremely well known individuals within the alternative, parapoliticals, conspiracy world, people basically just, that are out there that are awake in many ways. But, typically what we try to do here is just to go work on booking the lesser known personalities, voices, up and coming, people that that are there out in the grassroots that maybe folks have not heard too much of. So what I'm getting at though is that Elena, I think, would be a great guest, and if we could work on having her join us at some point, that'd be super. So Fred Bell was another name that came to mind as far as you're talking about 2001 rolling out this what seems to, according to what you're saying, go back to the Star Wars initiative. So Fred Bell, who you might know a little bit about, maybe a lot, he died the day after his interview with Jesse Ventura on former Minnesota State Governor Ventura's conspiracy theory series. So there was an interview that they did, and don't know if you heard about it or not, but yeah, it was kind of strange that he talked about the directed energy weapons and the way that they can be used, based, I guess it's like scalar weaponry. It's all beyond me, really. I don't have the scientific background whatsoever, nor really the grasp on things to really break it all down in the way that you managed to. But did you ever hear about Fred Bell and his passing? Did you find wasn't that a little odd? In particular, you mentioned the date 2001. Immediately, I'm thinking, well, geez, okay, the attack on the trade towers and all the speculation that there's been about, well, it's the jet fuel that melted the steel beams, and then this widespread evidence of nanoparticulates and this and that. What are your thoughts on Fred Bell and maybe a bit of a 9/11 tie-in there, perhaps?
On Fred Bell, I don't really know much about him. I think this is kind of the first I've heard about him. I don't know.
Well, Nick Begich, you certainly do. So this is great.
Yes.
A little bit of homework. So
this absolutely
could blow your mind. You start getting into how far down that rabbit hole you want to go. But so Nick Begich and Bernard Eastland, I know that I've seen Nick in an interview or two where he has referenced Mr. Eastland. But have you ever spoken to Nick yourself on a personal basis?
I haven't, and I would like to. I think he's a great guy, and I've read his book, and I have great respect for him, because I have great respect for people, Jaffe, coming out and talking truth, and especially in a time where you're excoriated for doing so. So I would love to have a conversation with Nick.
Truth is treason in the empire of lies. I'm not sure who said that exactly, a famous quote. Another one from Voltaire, of course, is that it's dangerous to be right when the government is wrong. So, another quote that I actually shared out with our YouTube audience, I think dropped it into our Skype chat box area as well, is the famous quote from Kissinger. You mentioned, of course, we're talking earlier about all the chaos that was generated and still continues to prevail, and likely there'll be the impact of Harvey will be felt for many years yet to come. But Agenda 21, the UN, and the efforts on the part of these freedom-loving Texans to perhaps break away, in the sense of what I guess a lot of Californians are talking about these days. But in a nutshell, I'm not going to read the whole quote. Kissinger said, "Today Americans would be outraged if UN troops entered Los Angeles to restore order. Tomorrow they will be grateful." So maybe I will read more. Hang on. "This is especially true if they were told there was an outside threat from beyond, whether real or promulgated, that threatened our very existence. It is then that all peoples of the world will plead with world leaders to deliver them from this evil. Help us. Oh, save us. Yes, the one thing every man fears is the unknown. When presented with the scenario, individual rights will be willingly relinquished for the guarantee of their well-being granted to them by their world government." Henry Kissinger. Oh, it actually says here, footnote, speaking at Evian which if you look at that word in reverse, it spells naive. France, May 21st, 1922, Bilderberger meeting. So, unbeknownst to Kissinger, his speech was taped by a Swiss delegate to the meeting. Suzanne, any thoughts?
He's actually just one of the elites. He's a pretty despicable character, and I know he's one of the primary warmongers that instituted instability and war in the Middle East. And he started that whole thing with the Middle East, going at each other. And they're despicable characters with an evil agenda, and it's sad. And they need to be exposed, and people really need to know these people's names. And I am not shy about my feelings on these characters. So let it be known who is doing this. Let it be known. They're absolute cowards. Can it be any more cowardly in what they're doing to us, dropping toxic things from the sky, frying us with frequencies, poisoning our food? I mean, these are the guys behind it. So these are the guys behind the Iron Curtain that people need to be aware of.
Indeed. David Rockefeller, of course, just recently, kicked the bucket at the age of, I think it was 101, 5 or 6 heart transplants later, managed to, saw the end of his life. So Kissinger clearly doesn't have much more time left himself. Nobody can live forever, although I guess there's a lot of effort on the part of these singularity, and really, it's a faux singularity, because as I've said, many times here now on the show, we're born into the singularity, we die back into the singularity, and it seems what's occurring here with this full spectrum dominance, that whole business is we're having attempts are being made to impose a false system. Some might say a system of the beast or what have you upon us, this matrix type technology and agenda. So who is it from We Are Changed? Luke Rudowski actually recently he actually managed to have a face-to-face conversation quite briefly with Donald Rumsfeld, former Secretary of State, out on the streets of New York. It was all just by blind luck that the meeting occurred. Just a brief, really just, no more than 30-second exchange or so. But it was Rumsfeld had no idea about World Trade Center 7, that there's a third building. He was just completely oblivious to the fact that there was more than 2 towers that fell that day in New York. As it seems, the majority of Americans themselves, they have very little idea that there was a third building. What do you think of the timing of these recent? Because I mean, what kind of hurt? We're looking at Harvey hitting Houston, Irma, I guess, out in Florida. Another hurricane coming in on the East Coast, all around the date of 9/11. So it could just be another one of these coincidence theories. But just any thoughts to that, Suzanne? And after you respond to that, if you do have any views, that I'd like to kind of shift things back over to Tech Lords, because I remember last year he brought up the whole business of these Gwen towers, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about that if we could. But first, Suzanne, any thoughts on the timing of the impact of an occurrence of these disasters?
I think it's important to note that David Keith is having a weather balloon experiment in Tucson in 2018. So I think storms like this coalesce with their agenda of their experiment, so they can legitimize and normalize what they're doing. Oh, well, we had those, 3 or 4 hurricanes in 2017. We have to do this now. So this is my thinking, and I don't know if there's a satanic kind of numerology there with 666, with the, the Irma, the Jose, the Harvey. I know Katia diffused, so there's these three big hurricanes. So that I know they're big into symbology and numerology. So that's where I'm coming from. And there's also a headline that came out this week. More, propaganda. Could re-engineering Earth help ease the hurricane threat? And scientists, and I think they're in China, Jaffe, but they're saying that they're coming forward with a $10 billion a year project, which proposes injecting sulfates into the atmosphere to cool down the Earth, reduce the number of hurricanes by 50% in 50 years. So now this is the normalization and the justification for pushing this, continuing to push this at us. It's climate change. We've got to get on this. We've got to do these geoengineering schemes to save us from, ourselves. So,
isn't it interesting the way that the narrative is framed? That's really, and so much to do with mind control, which, if you look at the word government, that's literally what the word means. Gubernmente, govern to control, mente the mind. So yeah, be careful, folks. Caveat emptor. Unfortunately, so many people just are not able to just even stop and question. Not saying that the official narrative isn't sometimes accurate or has a degree or grain of truth to it, but we've just really got to be on guard, and that when we're not, there's big trouble, and that we end up falling victim and prey to the psychopaths and their agenda. So I just kind of going back to what Tech Lords was talking about earlier, as well as what you just raised here regarding, I'm not sure how you put it exactly, sulfuric. The payloads, whatever it is that they're suggesting, recommending that be dropped and sprayed throughout various regions of China. But weather as a force multiplier, owning the weather in 2025. Thank you for that comment, Joe Emanon. I'm sure both of you are familiar with this, but this really, I think, ties in then, of course, to what Tech Lords was hitting on earlier regarding the amplification of this of these attacks. Really is, I don't see. There's no other way of looking at it as far as I'm circumcised. So, but Tech Lords, do you want to talk about Suzanne? Maybe if you want to just further, just kind of, add a little something to that, and then maybe shift things over to Tech Lords, and we can address this business of Gwen Towers. Suzanne?
I guess I just want to say that science is just despicable at this point in time, and I have a total lack of respect and disdain for them, because science really has become truth. Science has become theory and dogma, and this is the problem now. So we're looking at a prescribed doctrine, what we're told to believe and not to challenge. So this is a group of very well-paid people with a political agenda, and this is totally misapplied science to pursue political objectives, which is, the carbon taxation, the Agenda 21-2030, and this is all normalization and psychosocial control. So to me, it's how lame can the discussion get? We really have to do a lot more critical thinking and understand this narrative, this dialogue that they're pushing at us, and to start pushing back. We have to be, to me, righteously pissed off at this stage that this has gotten so far so fast and so dangerous.
Have you not managed to get any interviews lined up or appearances on CBC radio or television or any of the local cable TV stations? Nothing like that to this point? What's the deal there on that front?
I've had a number of interviews with newspapers, but you know what? I'm not going to do those at this point again unless they're open to the topic and they at least somewhat acknowledge and suspect that something's going on, because it's just not worth my time. The mainstream media is bought and owned, and they're owned, as we know, by 6 corporations. They don't want to touch this. So I haven't really reached out to radio stations. I'd certainly be open if they want to have a balanced dialogue, and but if they're just going to demonize and malign the topic and make light of it, I'm not prepared to do that. You need serious journalists, and there aren't any anymore. So.
Well, you should. There's no reason you should not be on national television. Frankly, I don't understand. It's totally. I mean, from your end of things, it's up to you, of course. But as you say, and I can understand the way that certain, all too many of the media operate is that, of course, they want to mock people and put them down or try to present them in a way which makes them come across as if they're kind of a little bit cuckoo, and they're just totally delusional, of course, and not really. That there's Noam Chomsky and the manufacturing of consent. I think he really hit on something there, that whole kind of concept, the hegemony and the mind control end of things. So, but one of the things that I find really interesting, I was just watching an interview with Bill Maher the other day, and he had he had 2 guests that had joined him, and the parameters of their conversation regarding this whole business, they were not able to break outside or see anything beyond just the established discourse. There was no mention of HAARP. There was no mention of weather warfare. There was no mention of any of the issues that we're talking about here today whatsoever. Absolutely zero. Which to me was really quite sad, but it was also it was disturbing. Peculiar, yeah. I mean, disheartening, but to this point, I guess it becomes almost predictable, really, and seems to indicate and reveal, reveal the sort of agenda that is at play, and that how they have these willing actors that are trotted out there, and put on the stage and put in front of the cameras. Or microphones or blogging or whatever kind of media it is that we're talking about, and just continue to pimp and promote the official narrative. So John Brennan, I think a former head of the CIA. Did you not find that interesting? The way that he in fact acknowledged that there is the cloud seeding and the HAARP. I'm not sure if he went into detail regarding the HAARP program, but that there is man-made climate change, folks, is kind of where he was coming at things from. But he was saying, as you referred to with respect to this business of China, that, we're doing it all for the common and public good because of global warming. So I'm not sure if he talked about hurricanes per se, that sort of thing. But are you familiar with the speech that Brennan gave last year?
Yes, I am. I think that was at the Council on Foreign Relations. I don't know. These guys to me are so transparent. They're real clowns. I mean, why should this head of the CIA have his nose in the weather? And I mean, if that isn't a red flag to denote that his nose is where it shouldn't be, I mean, this is none of his business when you have an intelligence agency interfering and trying to control something like this. And even somebody like Bill Gates, a computer guru, he is into vaccines and getting his nose in that, and also in geoengineering behind David Keith. So these are guys telling us what we think, what they think we need to hear, and it's more psychosocial control, and it also reminds me of the Smithsonian coming out saying they were accidentally geoengineering. I think that was probably a year ago too. So these are very lame duck discussions, and people really need to put down their phones and turn off the TVs. Just turn them off and look at what's going on in our society, because we really are at a precipice here. And these are the people at the wheel. These are the people controlling the thermostat and, pillaging our ecosystems and killing everything on our planet. And, as far as I'm concerned, the scientists who have been mute on this subject are helping to kill our planet as well, because silence is complicity, Jaffe, as far as I'm concerned. People have to start standing up. And, my friend Tony Pantelleresco, the nano researcher, he says we're all dead, we just haven't fallen down yet. And this is what is happening with these electromagnetic frequencies and this ladening of conductive metals and this nanobiology that's assimilating in us. We're all breaking down. We're all expiring at younger and younger ages. It's not normal. All these diseases, all these autoimmune illnesses, it's just time to start critically thinking. We have to. We need to save our planet. We need to see... And the human species, we're changing. It's humanity is changing. We're being assimilated with technology. I don't want to be a machine. I'm sure you guys don't either.
And that would, Morgellons, I think, is one of the issues you wanted to talk about. I know we addressed that last time around, but speaking of machines, maybe you could just flesh that one out. I guess there is some sort of these nanoparticulates which are self-replicating, I guess is what it is what has been determined to be the case. Pretty scary stuff. And I'm not sure, how does this work exactly? And, of course, when people go, in so many instances, they talk to their doctor about these matters, most of the time they are just... looked at with total bewilderment, or as if they have some sort of mental problems, or you name it. So do you want to just, I'm not sure if you want to tackle that first, or David Keith was a name that jumped out at me, which I thought was maybe more people would like to know a little bit more about this gentleman, if, as it seems you seem to believe he has some role within things here as far as, is he one of the good guys then, David Keith, or is he batting for the other team?
David Keith is totally batting for the other team, and I'm ashamed to say he's Canadian. But yeah, and he's been on this for a long, long time, and the cabal trots this guy out who is simply their puppet, trying to promote these programs as a savior to the earth. So he's been doing this for quite a while. Save us from ourselves, and talking about dumping alumina oxide and calcium carbonate and these types of things into the atmosphere. So, I think he's gaining ground in terms of the normalization, because he's keeping at it. He's in the public eye, and every few months we see an article about him or an interview. But what he's planning on, he's from Harvard actually. He's a Harvard professor. And what he's planning in 2018 is an experiment in Tucson, Arizona. And basically, I think it's a gondola equipped with some kind of propeller and sensor. It would spray a fine mist of materials like the sulfur dioxide and the alumina and stuff like that. And so the sensors would measure the reflectivity of the particles. So again, Harvard and Bill Gates are funding this experiment, and this is, again, totally reckless. They have so many things. They've been spraying for so long, Jaffe. I'm sure there's things not even on the periodic table up there, and they're just kind of, we're just going to go up and spray up there and see what happens. This is a war criminal. It's crazy that this is allowed, but the one thing is, he tried to do this a few years ago, and I think there was pushback or protest from a community. So I would encourage everybody in Arizona that knows about this to protest this, and get on Harvard, get on MIT, get on Bill Gates and whoever else is involved in it, and tell them we do not consent, because the thing is, there's not a public debate on any of this. We the public need to be involved in these debates. And these conferences and these experiments. They cannot just arbitrarily do this to the people without knowledge, consent, and we just got to get on it.
Leads me to wonder if maybe these sort of covert experiments have not already been taking place in Arizona, if only for the simple fact that there's a lot of talk of what's known as the Arizona dust or Arizona cough, there's some kind, or the Arizona crud, there's some sort of respiratory issues that I guess a lot of people have in that region of the States. I'm not sure if you've heard anything about this or not.
That's interesting because I know a few people that were hit very hard with the Morgellons nanopoisoning there. So I suspect it's one of the, I mean, the U.S. is so heavily sprayed, but then there's certain areas which are, California, I think Texas is very heavily sprayed, Arizona, and Texas. So I think these are the places that they're hitting there.
No, as far as just more with respect to health, what sort of statistics are you familiar with? Or, well, brain cancer is one of the issues in particular. I heard a story a number of years ago about how young people in Australia, I didn't take the time to really fact check things, which all good journalists, of course, need to do, working on getting more to the bottom of things, but that a lot of the youth in Australia were contracting a high level, and the rate of occurrence or incidence of occurrence throughout that age group, 10 to 15, something along those lines in Australia, was really bad, and there seemed to be some sort of correlation with the brain cancer and cell phone usage. So have you heard anything about these sort of things?
In terms of cell phone usage?
Yeah. The correlation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there's more and more, which is nice to see, there's more and more doctors, naturopathic doctors and neurologists and things of that nature stepping up and talking about the dangers of wireless technology, of cell phones. I mean, you're literally putting a microwave to your ear when you're doing that. And, I'm seeing with children, little children are getting brain cancer. But the thing is that people have to unplug from this. The families, the parents need to understand they cannot expose the children to this kind of 24/7 radiation, and then get the phones out of the teenagers' hands as well. Because this is another problem, Jaffe, in that people think this is just, the bee's knees having all this wireless technology, but this is in fact creating this electromagnetic space fence in which the nanotechnology in our bodies is activated. So, what people think is this great boon and, they can't live without is actually killing them.
Yeah, we here on the Robin Hood actually like to refer to it as Wi-Fi, not Wi-Fi. As this business, of course, to the way that we're programmed and just expected to parrot in return what many refer to as smart technology. In our eyes, largely the members of the crew here on the ship, it's not smart technology so much as it is spy technology. So smart meters, yeah. There's a major spy element to things, of course. So that's been a hot issue in the eyes of some. Now, as well as speaking of Wi-Fi, I don't know about the North America so much as Europe. I heard the Germans were kind of up in arms. The parents, I think, was one of the articles I came across a couple of years ago, talking about how they did not want Wi-Fi in their children's schools whatsoever, that it was a health concern, and they were just simply not going to stand for it, and as I understand, it was taken out. So we don't have anything here blasting. It's minimal. We've done what we could to ensure that we have no Wi-Fi connection here whatsoever, nor with any other miscellaneous projects that we're affiliated with. So, let's see. We haven't heard from Tech Lords in a while, so if he's still there, I'm hopefully still hanging around, that we can have him maybe kind of break things down. Gwen Towers, Tech Lords, that was a big issue. You were the first person I heard it from last year. What can you tell us about these things?
Well, I interviewed Dr. Mike Castle a few years back, like 5 years ago. I interviewed him 6 times, and he he shed some light on the Gwen Towers, which are dispersed all over the place. They say that they're like ground wave emergency networks, in case of emergencies. But no, they're not used for that. They're used for mind control, and they target certain individuals. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. So these Gwen Towers, and some of them are really close to schools, which is pretty bad. Our kids are being subjected to mind control at a really early age. To conform to whatever policy the quote unquote elites want from us. So it's pretty bad. But there are ways we can fight back. And like, for example, remove the money equation and all of this goes, all of this stops. Take, for example, cryptocurrency. It's really a big thing right now, and bankers are really, really tired of hearing about Bitcoin, and now they were seeing the market cap go up like crazy, and cryptocurrency actually will probably eliminate the banks, the central banks, and any bank actually. So that's one way of fighting all of these programs that are meant to, like Suzanne said, population control and population reduction, and so that's one way. If we take control of currency, peer-to-peer, totally decentralized, so that's the key, decentralization of money, and cryptocurrency can give that. And if you take that power away, if you remove the banking equation on this planet, a lot of things are going to change. A lot of things. They won't have the money. Their money will be worthless, and they won't be able to do anything. The chemtrails will probably stop overnight. And there's a big. I've been following the non-mainstream economic news recently for the past year, I say, and there is a big crash coming, a hell of a big market crash, stock market crash, and a crash of the U.S. Dollar as well. It's been falling since, I don't know, for at least 10 months now. And it's at its lowest in I don't know how many years. And I notice it because our Canadian currency is gaining value compared to the U.S. currency. So remove that equation, the banking equation, from the planet, and all of these programs will stop. So that's one way of fighting back. But there's not just that. You can get involved, like Suzanne and I are involved with Blue Sky, but others are doing the same. They're doing similar things. So awareness is probably the best way to awake the people that don't know what's going on. So I encourage people to do their research and to come up with their own conclusions, but they're pretty much in your face when you do the research. Seriously, you'll find that it's pretty bad. Pretty bad what's going on this planet. So do your research and you'll find the truth.
Absolutely. Most critical for people to become more active, aware, informed, and engaged. So a cashless virtual currency, an altcoin type project, was one of the things that we have on the table actually here via the Robin Hood, something I think you know about, Tech Lords, and that we have a few people looking at in the behind the scenes area of things, general operation here. So I think there should be more of that for sure, especially altcoins. But and we'll talk more about this in the Rogues Gallery after show. But Bitcoin is fine in itself, but I think we can't. It's not, as with everything, it's really not good to put all your eggs in one basket. So, as Charles Darwin said, Origin of Species, I guess, the classic text that he put together there, that essential element to survival was diversification, and that you spread things out, and things tend to go a little better for everyone, really. We've got about...
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I have a link I want to give to you.
Sure.
You want to create your own crypto? Not a problem. I'm going to give you a link. Write this down. beta.proofdashboard.com.
Beta.proof.
Proof dashboard. Proofdashboard.com.
Okay.
You'll be able to create your own cryptocurrency in less than 6 minutes.
Yeah, I think I've heard about that one actually. We'll add that to the show notes here. Definitely make a point of dropping by there and seeing what how that's set up or what it's all about. A few more things here that we'd like to address before we call it a night. Suzanne, let's see. I'm not sure if we want to tackle this one at the moment or not, but the whole business of, your New World Order poetry, that kind of fell. We talked about that last year, you wanting to maybe share some of that with our listeners. Even in the after show, it's completely, I think that went completely by the wayside. We forgot to address that. So would you be willing to share that with some of our Patreon subscribers and the listeners, people that join us in the after show today?
I'd be happy to share some of my poetry. Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, looking forward to that. And I think I was just going through, taking a look at the show we put together last year. Tech Lords, you seem to have some sort of knowledge regarding the infamous pirate Calico Jack. One of the things here, of course, on the Robin Hood is that guests are required, if they want to gain admission and win passage on the ship, not just merely conduct a conversation out on the docks of Skullport Harbor, but join us for the voyage out here on the high digital seas. That we, in accordance with the ship's articles and the captain's wishes, Captain Long John Sinclair, pirate story of some sort is expected. So I think last year, the two of you easily, we didn't bring that up this time around. But do you remember the story that you shared with us last year regarding Calico Jack, Tech Lords?
I have no memory of that story.
Oh, geez. Well, we'll have to go back into the archives and just revisit that one later then, I suppose. So, just quickly going through the notes here. One of the things that jumped out at me, Suzanne, was that you put a blog together recently outlining how chemtrails are legal under the Unpatriot Act. You, as with many people, unfortunately refer to it as the Patriot Act. Myself, I cannot help but, sorry folks, it's the Unpatriot Act. Okay, let's try to get that one. Put that in its place. That whole business of that, traitorous, treacherous, and just awful legislation. But what you said here is that legal under the Patriot Act, human experimentation, completely legal under this piece of legislation. Public Law 95-79, Title 50, Chapter 32, Section 1520, Chemical and Biological Warfare Program. I think even it goes as far as the government can, by law, because of course, they write the laws, kill you, have you murdered, all in the name of, is it science or experimentation, or God only knows exactly how they've got these insane things written down in their books, crafted as things go. So very crafty indeed. These the people who work on putting these terrible laws together. Care to comment, though, Suzanne, the blog that you put together regarding how chemtrails are, I guess, totally legal under the Unpatriot Act?
And I think this is where our treaties come in, and the fact that they're toilet paper. Because here they enact these treaties and prohibition of space-based weapons and NMOD treaty and biological diversity. There was no moratorium set, and here they can go and do this. So I just think that this is all again a facade, and they can do anything really to us. We are guinea pigs. We do live in a petri dish, and this is right out in the open. It's just so blatant. So
that was one of the notes that we had written down here, was how, if I can see what we've got exactly, that the U.S. and Canada back, I'm not sure how many years ago it was exactly, not too long, I don't think, but there was an agreement signed between the two governments relating to the exchange of information on weather modification activities. What can you isn't that something? What can you say about that? Besides, other than the way you've already put it.
I also want to state too things like non-proliferation treaties. We do have nuclear capabilities through our Gwen towers and through all these other devices. So again, that's a farce as well. But in respect to that, I just lost my train of thought, Jaffe.
The treaty that you blog, and the Unpatriot Act and the treaty that was signed. Do you know the year when that was signed exactly? It goes back about 20 years or so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're talking about the Canada and I think that was Canada and U.S. was, I think, around 1975. And so what they can do is, Canada and the U.S. can go into each other's borders within 200 miles and spray each other. And again, no regulation, no oversight. And I know there was one point in the province of Ontario where I live, Espanola, Ontario, where a Native community was very, very heavily sprayed. Most of the population there became extremely sickened. The Canadian military denied it, and later, it was basically not admitted to, but it was. They had photographic evidence that it was the U.S. military flying over Espanola, Ontario. I don't know if it was an experiment, defoliation, who knows, but these people were very sickened by this. So yeah, they can do it within each other's countries. And this is the whole thing. When you have legislation, this is more substantiation. We have a Weather Modifications Act as well in Canada. I think it's within provinces, but it's the same deal. So, when you have legislation, that's pretty powerful.
It gives you totally free license to pretty much, and free reign to do whatever it is that you want, of course. So that's just mind blowing. It's incredible. Is that the Mohawk or like Iroquois people, the famous reservation up there, the region? I guess they have quite a sizable territory that they oversee, from what I understand. I grew up myself out in British Columbia, so not too up to speed on Ontario's geography and the history of Native peoples throughout the region. Who was it that they were targeting exactly?
I'm not sure if it was the Mohawks or not. I'd have to look into that. But they did get some political involvement involved, and I don't know if there was a hearing about it. I think that's when more information came out. But I don't think it got anywhere. I don't think they got any restitution or anything like that. But they were very sickened. So,
couple things that really piss me off as far as national sovereignty is concerned, and it's a bit of a side note, but the way that I think it was the U.S., the DEA, they were allowed to just kind of freely march in and start poking their noses around different grow ops, which there's an abundance of, from what I understand, out in British Columbia. I'm not sure if they're still active in that capacity or not. It wouldn't surprise me. But I mean, and this is all in the name of their phony. It's what we here on the Robin Hood call the war on some drugs. That's hashtag, folks, TWOSD, the war on some drugs, because as we all know, it's just, that's really how it is. There's a lot of drugs which it's, quite arbitrary and subjective, are completely left, out of the picture, and that they have no concern for other than tightly regulating, I suppose, and making as much money from as is possible. But that was another issue that kind of ties in some ways as far as handing over sovereignty and that sort of thing. It's I've been living in Korea the past 15 years or so now, but there is a part of me which, even as an expat, I just get things like where I see the the state of things, the way that Trudeau or Jihadi Justin is, the course and trajectory he's taking the country. It's quite mind blowing. So I'm not sure what his position or stand is exactly with his government on this whole business of weather modification and things like scalar weaponry or with the weather warfare issue. I think a lot of them like to. There's been no. What is a formal position that up until for the longest time, I guess, government spokespeople would just completely deny the fact that he was even taking place. But with this recent official statement on the part of former head of the CIA, I believe is who he is now, Brennan, apparently not one of Trump's best friends. Two of them, I guess, don't exactly see eye to eye on a number of issues. But has the Canadian government issued any formal statements or taken an official position on this whole business?
What's interesting to note is former politicians have come out and openly stated that they feel that our weather's being modified through these frequencies and metals, and that would be Paul Hellyer, the former Defense Minister of Canada. He said chemtrails and HAARP were the evil Siamese twins of death and destruction, which was a pretty strong statement. And then we have Bill van der Zalm, the former Premier of BC, and he received a document, and large portions of it were redacted or blacked out, attesting to the fact that they were, doing these programs. So that I think those are two pretty powerful things. They do admit, I think, at this stage, because they're getting so much pressure now, and they can't continue to send out these standard reply letters saying that this is simply water vapor, because it's not holding. So basically they're saying that, they're conducting small scale experiments in, say, Alberta or BC, something of that nature. I've seen these letters. So they are attesting that small scale, maybe cloud seeding is going on. But as far as anything more than that, no. Justin Trudeau has not come out, publicly said anything, except for the fact that, we have climate change, and I know he's more than willing to give a lot of our money out to third world nations to combat so-called climate change. So he's breaking our bank to do that. He's also had on one video I saw a little while ago, and it was a local town hall meeting somewhere, saying that expect more climate chaos and terrible weather events to happen in the future. And I thought that was very interesting that Justin Trudeau was foreshadowing this but gave no context. So he's certainly an elite. I mean, I believe all the elites are in on this. I don't know, Freemason or MK Ultra, but certainly another puppet, and, just doing what he's told.
Just incredible. Bill van der Zalm, just to follow things up there, for clarity's sake, did he actually, you're saying he actually, and I know Paul Hellyer, very well known within the world of ufology, of course, hasn't held back too many punches, has appeared on multiple panels and, formal offering, testimony or just numerous interviews and commentaries, views on the matter. I think he's getting to his mid-90s now, but still managing to do a heck of a job from all accounts and indications. But Bill Vander Zalm, what exactly was it? Just to be clear on things, how did what occurred there on that front exactly?
So he believed that, the government was conducting secret programs unbeknownst to the public. So he asked them through freedom of information requests to release records regarding, these programs. And large portions of it were redacted,
right,
removed, and or blacked out. And so what was left was, paragraphs stating that there was some experimentation going on. There was some solar radiation management and, spraying particles to reflect sunlight back into space and that type of thing. So he's very open about that. He conducts interviews and he's a great guy. I would like more politicians to come out and be open about this, not just former politicians, because we're all breathing the same air, and they're going to have no place to run and no place to hide like us. So,
well, that's right. And this all took place not during his time in office. He was, I think, a premier of the province back in the maybe mid to late 80s. He followed, I think, Bill Bennett. I think he succeeded him. Maybe the early 90s, but this is just, when did this actually all occur and how long has he kind of been on the bandwagon?
I'm not sure. I think this was probably maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I also want to say that, great kudos to Paul Hellyer. We had a geoengineering rally in Toronto and Paul Hellyer came out for it. So I was thrilled at that. I mean, I like to see these guys walk their walk. I would like to see them come out more. I mean, I think they need to be doing conferences, and because people will listen to politicians, and particularly a former defense minister of Canada. So I know he's getting up there in age, or he's already there, but it'd just be nice to see.
Let's, as we wind things down here, and I wish we had more time, maybe we can save some of the conversation and talking points for the Rogues Gallery after show, which we have coming up here quite shortly, the premium content end of things that we share with our Patreon supporters, as well as anyone that decides to participate in things. But you actually, a couple quick, just an overview, if you would, to break things down, a couple campaigns that you recently, over the last year or so, I guess, they proved quite successful, and you helped to spearhead the Op Gas Pump, as well as hashtag Op Gas Pump, as well as hashtag Gag Canada. What does the GAG stand for?
So Gay Canada is run by a friend of mine, Bernadette Gervais Green. She's out of Windsor, Ontario, so she does a great job. What Gay Canada is, and I encourage any Canadians that are listening who want to get active and get involved, she's the central hub or networking area for people who, want to connect with like-minded people or, a particular group in a certain province. She can, direct them to these people. So that's where GAG is. That's where what GAG stands for. So we work together. We've done conferences together. She actually has a billboard up in Windsor, a Bye Bye Blue Sky billboard, which is fabulous. She's a terrific lady. She really works hard.
Alrighty then. I think we're going to maybe talk about the 5G rollout a little more in the after show end of things, as well as revisiting what we had initially referenced as far as Rhode Island's legislation is concerned, along with a whole number of other talking points, just as much as we can cram into the 1 hour time frame that we've got allotted there for the after show end of things. Suzanne, just any last closing points, and then we'll maybe let's first hear from Tech Lords, and then we'll close things off with Suzanne. Tech Lords, any closing points or last things you'd like to share with our listeners before we make our way on over to the after show?
Well, just look up. I mean, we're being sprayed, and we just gotta, put the word out there. And the billboards that Suzanne is putting up right now, and all the events that she participates in, it's really great, and hopefully a lot more people will get involved. I mean, we got to do something. We got to do something, or else our civilization is going to be extinct. So we need to take matters in our own hands and take our freedom and power back. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, a little more too than the way Suzanne put it the other day, just in our behind the scenes private messaging end of things as we were building up to today's presentation. Activism has a lot more to do with just than simply sharing a few posts here and there on Facebook. More or less, that's kind of the way she put it. So, anything else there, Tech Lords? Just before we shift things over to Suzanne.
I'll wait for the after show now. I'm gonna make myself a nice coffee.
Sounds good. Thank you. Okay, Suzanne. Well, hang on. Just wait. We just have some breaking. Well, this is interesting. We've got breaking news here. A bit of an update. An unexpected occurrence and guest. Is Captain Long John Sinclair? Okay, patch him on through.
Toppy, great show here today. This week, the chemtrail geoengineering program with Suzanne and Tech Lords. It's a wonderful encore and a way to do things here. So, thank you, Suzanne. Both you and Tech Lords for revisiting the Robin Hood, and it was wonderful information presented there. A lot of the things that the mainstream media, for whatever reason, seems not interested or able to want to discuss or talk about. So, we salute your courage.
I think he's saying that he really appreciated you coming on the ship there, Suzanne. Both you and Tech Lords.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it very much for having us back on. And you guys, I have to say, you are the invaluable guys when our media has no journalistic integrity. So, shout out and thank you to, allowing us to put out truth and have this dialogue and this discussion.
Yeah, he's a little hard to understand there sometimes with the rum-soaked grog that he. There's a lot that he consumes over the course of each day.
Not much of a drink, Johnny. What are you talking about?
Well, I'm sorry, Captain, but you really seem to.
Come on now. Give me a bit of a break now. I'm out of the lead in the ship here, just kind of staring out in the high digital seas. So, anyways, once again, all the best. We'll see you maybe on the after show.
Okay, Captain. Thank you very much for popping by. Yeah, he drops in from time to time. Never sure. He typically listens, of course, and doesn't really talk too much other than when he really has appreciated people coming by and helping to make things happen. So, and there he goes. He is gone. But, okay. Well, I'm sorry. And that about does it then, I guess, unless you've got anything you want to interject. We're going to kind of sail on out of here. Let's not forget, folks, byebyeblueskies.com, of course, is the main website. Once again, a lot of great information, articles, and ways of getting active and engaged, involved throughout your communities. I know we've got Faceless Troll here, who himself has been listening attentively, says he's going to be joining us in the after show. He lives in Ontario, so there's another potential candidate, someone who might take more of an interest in becoming, engaged in things, a more hands-on approach. Suzanne, just one last thing, though, before we do close the show off today. Are you not at any point have you not felt any concern for your safety? Speaking of targeted individuals, we all know that anytime somebody sticks their head above the parapet, that you're you got to. It's things can get a little rough sometimes, and you have all kinds of slings and arrows being cast your way. Have you had any strange or peculiar things come along which have maybe made you think twice? Any warnings or threats even? I mean, that sort of thing we do hear about from time to time.
I think most of my targeting, well, electromagnetically, I think we're all targeted because we've got these nanobots in us now, and we're all on a computer. So I'm targeted that way through electromagnetics, and not so much on Facebook necessarily, but my email, I tend to get that's where people try and kind of hammer me. So I don't really pay too much attention to it. I just it's ad hominem attacks, it's discrediting, it's a character assassination. So I know the agenda. I've done this long enough, and in terms of this kind of attack online with my Facebook forum, I vet each member very, very closely, and we are at high numbers now. And it's not even about the numbers. I could have a lot more members, but I want serious, open-minded people. So I would just say to anybody even out there too, be very discerning who you're friending and who you're getting close to, because people just aren't sometimes what they seem in this movement. So I just I like to be a real team player. We don't need more leaders. We need team players. I try and be cooperative, and I promote people's efforts. I like to build them up. And even when people's morale is really low, Jaffe, you just kind of pick them up and drag them along. This is what we need to do. And people will attack. And we just have to be prepared for that. This is the nature. We put ourselves out there. We've got to expect it. And you have to have a thick skin because you know it's going to happen. But I generally ignore most of that stuff at this stage. I think they're irrelevant in terms of the impact on me and what I do. But just to be aware of the agenda and what it is.
Alrighty then, and thank you for those final comments, closing thoughts. Joe Eminon, just going back to this business of Australia, has in the chat area drawn to our attention that the story of brain cancer cell use was on Aussie TV 120 minutes, 2006. So people, if they're interested, might want to follow that one up. Based on the information he's sharing with us there, as well as the fact that water meters are on Long Island. So let's just quickly as well, before we close things off, remind people that we have coming up here over the next few weeks a lot of great shows, including Talk Like a Pirate Day next week. I presumably are going to be hearing a little more from Captain Long John Sinclair. I know myself, I need to brush up on my when it comes to pirate talk, there's not a whole heck of a lot I can really offer, simply for the reason that they've kind of kept me sequestered down here after this whole Shanghaiing business that took place, and being put on the ship as I was here, plopped down in my seat in front of the mic, that all they've really cared about is that we put together a decent show every week and managed to produce a little bit of after show, the premium content, and not worry about anything outside of that. But we are looking forward to the Talk Like a Pirate Day next week. Should be a lot of fun. We've got on the 29th Interverse from off of minds.com. That's our friend Chance, of course, one of our Patreon supporters, which is, it's great to have him there, of course. Couldn't thank him enough. We hope to build up more Patreon supporters here as time goes on. It's a buck, I think, as much as $1, or some of our supporters have pledged $5 per piece of premium content. October chock full of good things, including a revisitation from Teresa M. Clayton. You can expect a kind of witchy show there that week. Thomas Duder on the 13th, and Rational Outlaw, two interesting Minds.com personalities, closing things off with a Halloween roundtable on the 27th. November, December. I tell you, folks, we are all booked up for the duration of the year, and in fact are taking and looking for new guests to fill up our 2018 schedule. In the meantime, thanks everyone for tuning in and being a part of things. Remember, as has been said so many times on this show, get your eyes off that Pokemon Go. It's time to look up. Aye now, there we be. Having carefully looked over each of our navigation panel instruments, checking every level, switch, knob, and dial, by all accounts and indications, we indeed see it's time once again to drop anchor inside the bay and draw an end to another week of Pirate Radio podcasts. Don't forget, if you're looking for a little more free-flowing action, we've likely got another great Rogues Gallery after show coming up next in either Google Hangouts or Skype. Also, if you've in any way enjoyed or found yourself benefiting from the shows we've tirelessly produced over the past year and a half plus, you might want to drop by our new Patreon tip jar page and lend a little support. Presently commanding a whole 6 big ones per episode are unimpeachable longshoreman math skills. Tell us we're on course this year to set aside around $150 in charity. Help to keep those numbers growing over on Patreon, and we'll be able to extend even more of a generous pirate hand. Be sure to join us again same time next week. Amazingly, we're now booked solid until December, with a whole wide range of colorful guests and show topics, along with what's bound to be a few big surprises. So be sure to drop by WPRPN.com's feature interview area and check out what we've got on tap for the last few months of 2017. If you yourself have an intriguing idea for a guest or story, you can either drop us a line directly over on WPRPN.com or fire us a quick email via pirateoneradio@gmail.com. WPRPN.com network subdomain links are also now available. Great for artists, musicians, podcasters, social media personalities, or pretty much just any landlubber looking to boost their online visibility, presence, and reach. Basic accounts can be launched for only $15 a year. Staking your claim now helps not only strengthen you and the network, we're also looking out for the little guy. That's right, folks. Half of all WPRPN's profits are redirected right back into the hands of the people who really need it most. Community charity. After all, we are the Robin Hood. You can further embark on your own personal pirate journey by liking, subscribing, commenting on, sharing, and following any of our main social media channels via Facebook, iTunes, Twitter, YouTube, Google+, or Minds.com. So don't forget to become engaged. Until we meet again out on the high digital seas, I'm your host, as always, the ship's Chief Communications Officer, Jaffe Ryder. Tally ho.